You're in the beverage aisle of the supermarket, looking at a shelf full of colorful packaging with fresh oranges printed on the front, green seals saying 100% natural, no added sugar, made with real fruit. And you think, this is the right choice. This is the healthy version. But what I'm about to show you today is going to make you completely rethink what you thought you knew about juice. Because the three best-selling brands on that shelf, the ones that look the healthiest, the ones you've probably bought this week, are spiking your blood sugar the same way a soda does, with the difference that soda at least doesn't pretend to be healthy. Stay with me until the end, because once you understand what's really inside these bottles, you'll never look at them the same way again. Let's start with the foundation of all of this, because without understanding this first point, nothing that follows will make complete sense. The image of a squeezed orange on the front of a juice carton has no legal relationship to what's actually inside it. This isn't opinion, it's the FDA's regulatory position. The agency allows manufacturers to use illustrations of fresh fruit even when the product doesn't contain a single drop of natural juice directly extracted from the fruit. In most cases, what you find is a combination of water, reconstituted concentrate, and artificial flavoring listed on the label simply as natural flavor, an umbrella term that can hide up to 50 different chemical compounds with no obligation to list them individually. 50 compounds. In 2 words, and that's completely legal. The problem isn't just what's being left out, it's what's being actively communicated. When you see an orange on the package, your brain processes that as fruit, as nature, as something that came from a tree and reached you with minimal interference. And that's exactly the perception the industry needs you to have, because without it, you'd stop in the aisle and actually read the label. Now, about the label, and specifically about the seal that confuses American consumers the most. When you read 100% juice on the front of the package, you assume you're drinking fruit. That's the natural reading, the reading anyone would make. But what that seal actually means, in regulatory terms, is much more limited than it appears. It only indicates that no refined sugar was added separately to the product. That's it. This label doesn't prevent the juice from having been manufactured from ultra-processed concentrate, and that's where the real problem begins. During the industrial concentration process, juice goes through an evaporation stage that removes water to reduce volume and make transport easier. In this process, it loses fiber, polyphenols, and practically the entire cellular structure of the fruit, the so-called cellular matrix, which would normally be responsible for making that fruit's sugar absorb slowly and gradually into the body. What's left after that is essentially a solution of fructose and glucose with no slowing mechanism whatsoever. And the practical result is that you're consuming the glycemic equivalent of a Coca-Cola inside a package that says no added sugar. This isn't an exaggeration, it's biochemistry. To understand why this matters so much, you need one simple number, the glycemic index. A glass of industrial orange juice has a glycemic index between 65 and 75. A whole orange, the physical fruit, with pulp and fiber, has a glycemic index between 35 and 40. The difference isn't in the fruit. The fruit is the same. The difference is the absence of fiber. Fiber acts as a physical barrier inside the small intestine, slowing the rate at which fructose is absorbed into the bloodstream. When you remove that barrier and liquefy the sugar, it reaches the blood within minutes, triggering an insulin spike that, metabolically speaking, is identical to that of a conventional soda. And the problem with repeated insulin spikes goes far beyond diabetes, though diabetes is a relevant destination in this equation. Studies link these repeated spikes to chronic low-grade inflammation, progressive insulin resistance, which is the stage that precedes type 2 diabetes, and the buildup of visceral fat, which is specifically the type of fat stored around internal organs, and which research consistently links to higher cardiovascular risk. You could be drinking something that looks healthy every morning while slowly building a metabolic environment that works against you. Now let's get to the specific brands. And I'm going to be direct because that's what you came here for. The first is Naked Juice, especially the Green Machine and pomegranate blueberry versions. The clear packaging, the green design, the no added sugar promise, and its presence on the shelves of gyms and natural food stores create a perception of a clean, premium product made for people who care about their health. But let's look at the data. Naked Juice Pomegranate Blueberry contains 61 grams of sugar per 15.2-ounce bottle, For reference, a 12-ounce can of Coca-Cola has 39 grams. Naked has more sugar per ounce than Coca-Cola, and it's sold as a premium healthy alternative. That's the kind of inversion that happens when the packaging works harder than the nutrition label. The second brand is Welch's Concord Grape 100% Juice. The 100% seal is large,
drink is
sits
my
front and
favorite
center on the
Welch's
package,
drink. It is so
and works exactly
delicious.
as it was designed to. It conveys legitimacy and trust. A single 8-ounce serving of this product delivers 35 grams of sugar, with no fiber, no fat, no protein.
Juice,
No
so that's why you
nutrient
can
with
taste
any
like the
capacity
apple.
to slow
Orange
down the
juice,
absorption of that sugar.
pineapple juice.
What this
so that's
means
what
in
you're getting, like,
practice
those
is that
flavors
those
together, and
35
this
grams
tastes perfect.
hit
It's like
the
the
bloodstream
perfect
at the
cocktail
same
of
speed as a
juices together, like
conventional
all my
soda,
favorite.
with the
Apple,
only
orange.
difference being that the package says juice, and the consumer leaves the store thinking they made a good choice. The third, and perhaps the most problematic precisely because it's the most ubiquitous, is Mott's 100% apple juice. This brand is in an enormous number of American households with kids, consistently positioned as the safe family option. An 8-ounce serving contains 28 grams of sugar and literally 0 fiber, 0 protein, 0 fat. There isn't a single nutrient in this formulation capable of slowing the absorption of that sugar. Giving a kid Mott's at breakfast has the same glycemic effect as offering them a can of soda. And that's not an ideological claim. It's a direct consequence of the product's nutritional composition. Before we get to the safe alternatives, I need to show you something about the industrial process that turns juice into a product, because it changes how you understand what you're buying. After juice is squeezed at an industrial scale, it goes through a process called deaeration. In this process, oxygen is removed from the liquid and it's stored in airtight tanks. For how long? Months? Sometimes up to a year? This lets companies maintain enough inventory to operate at a global scale year-round, regardless of the fruit's seasonality. The problem is that in this process, the juice naturally loses its aromatic compounds. It literally stops tasting like juice. So companies hire specialized labs to create what the industry calls flavor packs, aroma packages chemically derived from the fruit's own byproducts, added back into the liquid before bottling to restore the flavor lost during storage. These packs don't need to be declared separately on the label because they're technically derived from the original fruit, but their chemical profile is completely different from freshly squeezed juice. And some independent research suggests that certain compounds present in these flavor packs, with cumulative exposure, act as mild endocrine disruptors. Brands like Tropicana and Minute Maid, which process tens of millions of bottles a year, rely directly on this system to maintain a standardized flavor across all seasons. When you drink a juice that tastes like orange in December, the flavor pack is the reason why. Now for what you actually came for, 4 options that are genuinely different from everything described so far. The first is V8 Original. Not very glamorous, rarely shows up in wellness posts, but from a metabolic standpoint, it's the exact opposite of everything listed above. An 8-ounce serving has only 7 grams of sugar and delivers the nutritional equivalent of 2 servings of vegetables: tomato, carrot, celery, beet, spinach. Low glycemic index, no added sugar, real micronutrients. It's quiet and effective, and that's what you want in a drink when the goal is actual health rather than the appearance of health. The second is Palm Wonderful. Pure pomegranate juice, no added sugar, no preservatives, no artificial sweeteners. Each bottle is made with the equivalent of roughly 4 whole-pressed pomegranates. Pomegranate has one of the most well-studied anti-inflammatory profiles among fruits. Its polyphenols, especially L-glutanins, show up fairly often in research on cardiovascular health and inflammatory markers. Palm preserves that profile without artificial interference. The third is Uncle Matt's Organic, one of the few orange juice brands on the American market that combines organic certification with a not-from-concentrate process and what the company calls intentional late harvesting, which lets the fruit develop its natural sugar-acid balance before being pressed, without needing artificial correction afterward. It's still a product with a meaningful glycemic index. Don't forget, fruit is fruit, but it's structurally different from the reconstituted concentrates that dominate the shelves. The fourth is Suja Organic Uber Greens. And here's an important distinction, because Suja has different lines with very different compositions. I'm not talking about the brand's fruity blends, which have the same glycemic problem as the other products discussed here. I'm talking specifically about the Uber Greens line, which keeps vegetable content above 70%, is cold-pressed in small batches, and uses apple only as a minimal palatability base, in a quantity too small to dominate the product's glycemic profile. The difference between one line and another from the same brand is enough to completely change the metabolic impact. And finally, the piece of data that matters most in this entire conversation, and one the industry clearly would have preferred you never learned. A study published in the British Medical Journal, which followed more than 100,000 adults over several years, identified a direct correlation between regular fruit juice consumption, including 100% natural, no added sugar juices, and increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes. The same amount of whole fruit in the same study showed an inverse correlation, protection against the disease. Same fruit, different form. Opposite result. This finding was largely ignored by American public health campaigns. And part of the reason for that silence is public and verifiable. Some of the largest nutrition associations in the United States receive direct funding from juice manufacturers. This isn't speculation. It's in those organizations' publicly available transparency reports. That structural conflict of interest is what keeps juice in the healthy food category in the public imagination long after science began questioning that classification. And as long as that conflict keeps existing, the shelf is going to keep looking healthier than it actually is, and the consumer is going to keep paying more for products working against them. You deserve to know what's inside what you buy. That's the work I do here.